Sinister 2, more sinister, sinisterer. Sinister 2 is directed by Ciaran Foy, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, written by C. Robert Cargill and Scott Derrickson, and stars James Ransone, Shannon Sossamon, Robert Daniel Sloan, and D'Artagnan Sloan. And Sinister 2 picks up where the first movie left off. Now the unnamed deputy from the first movie, played by James Ransone, is doing his own investigations about Bughuul, and he's pretty much going around burning houses where Bughuul might strike next. But as he's about to burn this one house, he finds out that it's kind of illegally being occupied by this mother, Courtney, played by Shannon Sossamon, and her two twin children, Robert Daniel Sloan and D'Artagnan Sloan. So now the deputy has to kind of figure out how to protect this family and break the chain of Bughuul. Now, I actually watched Sinister 2 in its entirety before I watched the first one in its entirety, and I didn't really understand the second one. This is a sequel that isn't just like a copy of the first one. It really follows the story, and it doesn't really explain Bughuul's rituals or whatever again. So if you don't watch the first one, you won't really get the second one, I think. And I thought that going back and watching the first Sinister first and then going to the second one would help me appreciate the second one more. But it didn't help because this is still a bad movie. It's just, there's bad acting everywhere, worse writing, and the scary atmosphere from the first one is just nowhere to be found. Now, before I say anything else, I just want to bring up that because Bughuul is in this movie much more than he was in the first one, you really kind of notice that he does kind of look like the guitarist of Slipknot. I mean, just go online, look for that picture, and it really looks like him. And you still might find that scary, but I happen to kind of like Slipknot, so it's not scary anymore. And first, let's talk about the Super 8 footage in this movie. The Super 8 footage in the first movie was effective because the tapes there felt real. The footage was clumsy and realistic, and the murders being portrayed in those tapes were more or less simple and capable of being done by children. But in this movie, the tapes have killings that are so elaborate that one of them even includes fake CGI alligators, and this really shatters the illusion. You kind of lose the illusion that these crimes are being done by kids, and you lose the illusion that these are actual tapes found in the past. It's really clear that they wanted to make these tapes kind of like the Saw series by just kind of, you know, making the murders more and more gruesome, but it just doesn't work with this material because the first movie showed us that there is more to Sinister than just these tapes. Unfortunately, gone as well is the cool ambient creepy music from the last movie. I mean, the score here by Tom and Andy isn't bad or anything, it's just it kind of turns this movie into a run-of-the-mill horror thing. They've also jumped on the bandwagon here of using old-timey songs in creepy ways, and I've always been kind of ambivalent about that. Like, it doesn't really affect me that much. I find it really funny, though, that they've addressed the fact that in the first movie, whenever they'd play Super 8 tapes, suddenly there'd be like a musical score playing in the background accompanying the tapes. So to fix that, here, when the ghost kids watch the tapes, they bring in like a vinyl player and they play their own music, which somehow makes it more stupid and makes it make less sense because, you know, why would they have these vinyl recordings lying around? And the way these vinyl recordings sound, it's just like screeches and, you know, scary noises. And all these loud, unnatural noises that play during the jump scares are just annoying. They're not scary. Sometimes I react first to the sound before I get to comprehend what I'm seeing on screen. And the structure of this movie can get very repetitive again, like the first one, except to an insane degree. I mean, at least in the first movie, there was a sense that Ellison was discovering things about Bughuul as he investigated. But here, we're treated to the same cycle of these two kids being made to watch these tapes with the ghost kids, while the now ex-deputy so-and-so gets attacked by the most random jump scares ever. And really, like, there's no rhyme or reason to these jump scares. Like, he'll be investigating like a church, or he'll be just sitting in his apartment and suddenly Bughuul will, you know, jump out and scare him. And it's like these scares don't even matter in the next scene. And there's not really any rhyme and reason either to the deputy's investigating. Like, he doesn't really learn anything new about Bughuul. The editing here is by Ken Blackhill, by the way. That's a really cool name. But I really just want to underline the fact that tension in a horror movie is not just keeping things quiet and then having something pop out scaring the audience. Tension is achieved when you let the audience feel constantly in peril, and this movie doesn't do that. Now, I'll admit it was a ballsy move to continue the story of the first Sinister instead of just repeating the pattern like other horror movie sequels, but this material can't really go anywhere now that the intrigue of who Bughuul is and how his rituals work, now that that's gone. I mean, it's cool that the deputy is doing his own investigation, but you never learn anything, like I said, about Bughuul. But the worst mistake in this movie writing-wise was to make these ghost kids actual characters who constantly interact with these twins, because it just doesn't make them scary. Every time they pop up, you just kind of want them to go away because they're annoying and not scary. And I really have to bring up this one character, the character of Clint, Courtney's husband, who is just so unbelievably evil that you end up disliking him more than Bughuul, and you just kind of want to see him die, which is not the right direction to go. And he's just so, cranked up on anger all the time. He's just shouting and punching people and, stuffing mashed potatoes in his kid's face all the time. And what's really disappointing with the script is that it's no longer a story about obsession. It tries to be about family and whatnot, but it never really pushes through with that, so it's just a generic horror movie. Now, the acting from the adults is actually pretty good. I'll get to that later, but the kid actors in this movie, wow, they are not good at all. I'm sorry. The Sloan twins here always seem like they're acting. Like, their facial expressions don't really change, their line delivery is really stilted, and the people who play the ghost kids are just so, they're either really showy, like, oh, I'm acting, or they're really smug, like, oh, I'm supposed to be, superior to these twins, so they really feel it, and it just doesn't work. And the director here just doesn't build the kind of atmosphere that Scott Derrickson did in the first movie. I mean, he's already hampered by the fact that we now know who Bughuul is and how his killings work, but he doesn't really make any attempt at subtlety or mystery anyway. But the worst offense for me here, which really annoys me, is that this movie doesn't follow its own rules. There is no reason for Bughuul to be going around terrorizing the deputy when the deputy isn't really doing anything that bad, I think. And why would Bughuul appear in his apartment and attack him there? It makes zero sense. There's an attempt to make the family drama here come across as poignant, but it's not. It's just really shallow and contrived. And there's this attempted romance between Courtney and the deputy, which unfortunately doesn't really amount to anything. The only thing saving this movie is the acting from James Ransone and Shannon Sossamon. James Ransone is once again really likable. He can't really carry this movie, he can't really save it as the lead, but he is good, he is funny in a lot of parts. And Shannon Sossamon is surprisingly very natural and really dials her performance down even when she's surrounded by all these over-actors. Doesn't change the fact that Sinister 2 is still a bad movie. I really just can't recommend this to anybody, especially if you're a fan of Sinister. Stay away from this movie like the plague. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Sinister 2. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.